sound intelligible, so I don't know what to do with it. Probably being led by
I just read on the
Perpetuity. What's that?
The notification said open rebuke is better than concealed.
Wow.
So,
Do you hear that, Brett? Do you hear that, Brett? Yes. Do you hear that, Brett? So whenever that happens, you're loved.
further darts bouncing off of the
All right, we're going to continue. We're going to continue our look of angels today. We started this 2 weeks ago, or week before last week. So I thought it'd be interesting for us to do this study of angels, and a lot of places where it might kind of surprise us that they are, and some things that they do. So we're going to kind of start at the beginning. You're welcome, Brett. And go through some of this stuff that we went through a couple of weeks ago, because a number of you guys weren't here. And then we'll get into some of our verses. I was listening to a podcast about this and thought it'd be very interesting to go through not only the idea of angels, what they do. A couple of weeks from now, we're going to get into the seraphim and cherubim and what they do and some of the different Bible parts about them. But we're going to start here with some terms and definitions about angels, and then we're going to see some places where they're found, what they do. I have found, at least from some of the things that I have listened to, that the term angels is a fairly loaded one. And by loaded, it means that when people hear or think of the term, there's all kinds of ideas that they may have from movies that they saw, or books that they read, or lessons that they heard, or whatever the case may be. But in terms of looking at the word and understanding what it means and where it comes from, may be a helpful thing to you and for you. I know it has been for me, very much so. So first, looking at terms and definitions. The term is angelos, what the Greek word is, and it just simply means messenger. There's nothing, unique or Hollywoodish about that. It's what it means. And so, because of the fact that it's a loaded word, it's helpful for us to see what the word means and the places it's used. So if you think of all the places and situations where this term is used, a mom and oftentimes a grandmother will call their grandchildren, my little angel, which has a lot of different reasonings and ideas behind that. Sometimes we get helped, somebody, maybe we have car trouble and somebody comes over and helps us, and we may tell our friends, an angel helped me today. And all we mean is somebody came by and took care of a need that I had. Now, let me make sure that I share there's nothing wrong with these. I'm not being critical of us doing this. This is just oftentimes when we hear the word angel, these are the places sometimes that we put this term, because we have these ideas about angels in whatever way we were given those ideas. So looking at this term again, it means messenger. The second is it technically means one who is sent. The basic idea is messenger, but when you actually look at the term, it means one who is sent. And so God uses angels to do things for him, give messages, to do different actions for people within the Bible. And I think the challenge that we have is that it's actually a transliterated word. Which again, there's nothing wrong with that, but the challenge is our understanding what the word means and what's happening whenever we go to those places and see this word. So a transliterated word, if you didn't know, is when you write or print a letter or a word using the closest corresponding letters of a different alphabet or script. And some of the examples we have other than angel is Christ. The word is Christos. Baptism is brought over from baptismos, and then apostle. And all three of these words are Greek words that are brought over into English, and they create a word that didn't exist before. Yeah.
So, in regards to angel being messenger,
Yeah.
Clearly there's those places in the Bible where they use the word messenger.
Yes.
So, I would assume that the translators are making a judgment call on when it's a spiritual messenger versus when it's an earthly messenger.
In some cases, one of the ones we're going to look at is with Abraham, and as the Lord visited Abraham. So yes, they make a judgment call when they're going to use whichever word, which for me and my brain, the way my brain works, the whole Bible is a translation. So translate the thing. Don't use angel, use messenger. That's what the word means. Don't create another word and possibly create some understanding issues there. But yes, for sure. And now why they chose to make those decisions, who knows? And I think there are those places that might be interesting to you. Then again, maybe not. Maybe you don't care. I don't know. But for me, a number of the places where the transliteration happens, and you have to, at least I do, wonder, okay, what does that word mean? Why did they choose to transliterate it as opposed to just bring over the word or bring over the meaning, rather? Because that's what you're doing. So before we, yeah.
I think, for instance, the word baptized, the reason they did that is because there are other places where they're talking about dipping or washing something.
Yeah.
And that would confuse people. So they're like, okay, we're going to come up with a word to emphasize what this is.
Yeah. Another idea, and there's probably, I don't know, a dozen out there, but I had read that whenever King James was having his translation done, he chose to soften the word. Instead of it being immersion, they had other possibilities out there, and so you use baptism as opposed to immersion. And that way people could kind of make their choice. Who knows if that's true or not, but that's one of the ideas that was out there. So real quickly, when you look at the seraphim, and we're not going to look at cherubim today, seraphim is plural, seraph is singular, and it means burning ones or fiery serpents. So there's places that we're going to look at in the Old Testament where you find these things. Sometimes it's translated as seraph or seraphim. Sometimes it's translated as burning ones or fiery serpent. And so how do you know the difference? Well, you have to look at the word and see what's going on in the context and a whole host of things and figure out what's going on there. So angel in Hebrew is one who is sent, somewhat the same as Greek. Prophet in Hebrew, if someone were to ask you today, what does a prophet do and what does the word mean? What has always been your thought? What does the word prophet mean and what does a prophet do? And I ask you that because oftentimes if you ask your general person, well, a prophet foretells the future. That's what a prophet does. Well, that's not really accurate. They can tell the future if God chooses, say, if you continue to do this, this will happen. But a prophet is one who bubbles forth. They have God's message and they share God's message. That's really it. That's what they do. The word apostle means to send away. and almost send away officially. And then when you look at the word Malachi, the Old Testament prophet, the root word for angel is malak. So Malachi is my messenger, also, of course, a prophet. So this isn't going to change your life in any way, but these are at least interesting things to me. So we're going to look at a number of verses today and see how far we get in the Old Testament, looking at angels and where we find them and what happens to them and what their actions are. So Genesis 16:7, we find here the angel of the Lord finds and comforts Hagar with Ishmael. And I find this interesting because I don't know when the last time you read this story was, in Genesis 16. Have you ever found in your life sometimes when you're doing something or going through something and something cracks you up and you wonder, I wonder if anybody else gets the same humor or delight out of this kind of stuff? And then you find out it's just you. Then you find out, okay, I'm on an island here. It is just me. Or I share a joke with Terry and she just stares back. I'm like, okay, it's just me. I'm just odd that way. But you know what? I can handle it. I'm okay. I'm good. There are a few other weird ones out there like me. Right, Brett? So... I feel it. Wait, is it over here? Oh, you're with me too. Oh, yeah. Now everybody comes out of the woodworks. Everybody's now weird like me. I get it. So in Genesis chapter 16, we find that the birth of Ishmael here and all of the things that take place. In verse 7, we find now that the angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness along the road of Shur. The angel says to her, Hagar, Sarah's servant, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarah, she replied. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress, submit to her authority. And then he added, I will give you more descendants than you can count. The angel also says, you are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears, for the Lord has heard your cry of distress. And so what are some of the unique things that we find out here about angels, messengers, however we want to refer to them, from this story? What do we learn about angels from what Genesis here tells us? What's that? Okay, know what God says. Absolutely. So first of all, for me at least, is there's communicating ability. They're not just up in heaven, but they came down to have a conversation with Hagar. And so whether Hagar could see her or not, it doesn't seem to be implied either way. But there's a conversation. So this angel, speaking Hebrew, you assume, and talking to Hagar and having this conversation with her back and forth. It didn't seem to distress Hagar that this was happening, but this conversation goes on. Also, this angel knows what's happening with Hagar, has awareness. It's not like some random person that comes up and meets her and goes through this whole getting to know you thing. This angel knows what's happening with Hagar, knows Sarah's name, knows the situation, and also shows this compassion on her to tell her, go back. What else does the angel know that maybe Hagar herself didn't even know? She's pregnant. Yeah. So, and not only are you pregnant, you're going to have a son. She knew the gender of the child, but then she tells her what? What to name the child, which I would imagine for this time was not something necessarily done. So you are pregnant, you're going to have a son, and this is what you are to call him, because God hears, God has heard your cry of distress. And then the conversation goes on, and so this messenger from God goes down to comfort Hagar, to give Hagar wisdom, to direct Hagar in terms of what she should do to calm her down. And it's also interesting to me that in verse 9, I think it is, return to your mistress and submit to her. Because you're going to need her and Abraham. You're going to need that setting to take care of your child, to raise your child, et cetera, et cetera. So taking care of not only her, but this child that is in her womb. All of this stuff is happening in terms of communication, directing, giving wisdom, caring for, all done by this messenger of Jehovah that goes and visits with Hagar.
And one of the things I find interesting about most of these stories is the people receiving the message from the messenger don't act astonished.
Yeah.
It's just like everyday life.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, was it everyday life and we just have a few recordings of it in the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Or is there some special spirit connection that makes them feel like it's just a normal everyday
Yeah.
event?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
And then my other question or thought is, do angels have gender? I know some of the messengers are clearly identified as male or female
Yeah.
by the
Yeah.
pronouns used in the Bible, but
Yeah.
do they have?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we know about obviously Michael and Gabriel. And then I did some studying on, archangels and where their standing is and all that. We don't seem to find any female angels. Not that they're not there, or if angels even have gender. But we do know about Michael and Gabriel. And that's all we know. But to your point, I think very, very interesting. And this may not be a great way to connect the dots, but in John 20, and it doesn't mention this in any of the other three Gospels, Jesus did a bunch of stuff that's not recorded. A whole bunch of stuff, both actions and possibly teachings that's not recorded. What we have is what God wants us to have. So were there more interactions with angels? Like a lot more? Was it normal? Whether it was just a voice or whether it was what we find, I think we're going to look in Genesis, later on in Genesis, where Abraham brings the visitors and they eat and all of those things. All we know is what we have. But yes, those things, I really find that stuff very, very interesting. Any other thoughts about Genesis 16 and what we see here? Yeah.
Clearly, the angel has power.
Yeah.
It was given power, possesses power of some kind. Because
Right.
the angel says, I will surely multiply. Now, the angel could just be speaking for God.
True.
Speaking
Yeah.
his words
Yeah.
in that context.
Yeah.
He does say, I will surely multiply your offspring.
Right. Yeah. But even to that point, I want you to consider here the things that this angel knows. Now, obviously, it's a messenger of Jehovah. And so, if I were to send you someplace to do something and I'm like, okay, here's what I want you to accomplish. There's 10 things here. And you get there and how do you know all that? Well, because so-and-so sent me. So he told me what's happening. The angel here not only knows her name, knows Sarah's name, knows the situation, gives her a command, if you will, to return to your mistress, submit to her authority. You're going to have a son. It's a boy. This is what you are to name him. Notice in verse 12, he will be a wild man, untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone. Everyone will be against him. He will live in open hostility. So there's a lot of things here. Imagine here for Hagar, as she's listening to all this, going, holy cow, I just learned that I'm going to be a mom, but not only that, now you're kind of breaking down the future for me. Everything that's going to happen, what his name's going to be, all of these things that God has given this messenger to share with Hagar. And again, you know, I don't know, I have a hard time believing that somebody's going to be, you know, sitting next to a well, kind of like the woman at the well, and all of a sudden this voice just hits, like Jesus whenever he was baptized, and it just hits, and she's having a conversation with air, as opposed to, you know, a guy coming over, or maybe a female coming over and having this because to Brett's point, in verse 7, the angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water. You know, it's a female. At least it has female qualities, which may be more connecting with Hagar. I don't know. So, interesting things here. Genesis 22. And of course, this to me is just as interesting because as Abraham's faith is proved, tested here, and when you go down to verse 11, after all of this had happened, Abraham is about to go through the process. As he's about to sacrifice his son, at that moment, an angel of the Lord, a messenger of Jehovah, called to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." Yes, Abraham replied, "Here I am." "Don't lay a hand on the boy," the angel said. "Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear or honor or revere God." So how does this conversation happen? This isn't someone standing next to them. Like this conversation, it's not a physical human being. And where else does this kind of hyperlink you to this voice from heaven coming down and saying, you know, do not hurt him in any way? Because the voice doesn't come next to him. It comes from heaven, an angel of the Lord. The transfiguration, yep, absolutely. So we have the transfiguration and then the baptism of Jesus. In both of those cases, this happens. And then I think it was a number of weeks ago when we looked at, which I had forgotten about, when Jesus is praying in John 10, halfway through his prayer, and he tells God, "I'm saying all this to you so that people will hear." And then from heaven, God replies to Jesus' prayer, to his statement that I am taking care of you, I will take care of you, I will blah, 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 blah. So apparently it happens 3 times within the New Testament that this voice comes from the heavens and speaks. And here it's called, you know, the angel of the Lord. I think I mentioned last week that I think an argument can be made. And when I say argument, you know, an idea be presented that when you look at certain places, the giving of the law at Sinai, the commander of the armies of God that stood in front of Joshua in Joshua 5, I think it was 4 or 5, and a few other places, that is the not yet carnate Jesus. In 1 Corinthians 10, I think it is, when it talks about the water, the rock that gave the water to Israel while they were in the wilderness, it literally says that rock was Jesus, giving them and taking care of them, the water in that way. So, again, it's nothing to you know, feud about, but just interesting to talk about that if if the commander of the army of the Lord is Jesus, and the giving of the law at Sinai, that angel, that messenger is Jesus also, as well as the rock. The question sometimes is asked, what was Jesus doing before he was incarnate? And that may be some of that answer, that he was there with them as that spirit, as that messenger, that angel, and then he is incarnate. The Word was with God. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That's great segue. So in John 1:1, the Word was with God. The Word is there. The Word is giving direction to the people in a number of ways. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Kyle.
The word "the" is also a definite article. So, for instance, in like Acts chapter 3, where the apostles and disciples go house to house breaking bread,
Yeah.
and then there's also the breaking of bread.
Yeah. Yeah.
Supper, and so
Yeah.
it's not just an angel of the Lord; it's the angel of the Lord.
Right. Yeah. Good point.
Article is someone very specific.
Good point. Yeah. Because in Hebrew and Greek, the articles are a lot more emphatic. They directly point to something. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to another time to the voice from heaven and Saul on the road to Damascus, lights
Yes.
around him.
Yes.
That was actually Jesus speaking.
Yes.
From heaven. Saul, why are you persecuting me?
Right.
So that's an example of he was with God
Right.
in the Old Testament, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
He was here incarnate, and now he's with God again.
Yeah.
Speaking to Saul directly.
Yeah. 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 Which again, it's nothing to argue about, but it's just really, really fascinating to consider those moments that Jesus is there. And I think, again, and I realize I'm going to very much get in the weeds here, but when you talk about these loaded terms that come with a lot of content and a lot of meaning, you ask somebody, say the angel at Sinai, the angel that gave the commands, that was Jesus. You have Sinai and people, what they've always thought about that, and then you have the idea of Jesus, and you're like, that's nuts. Why would Jesus be at Sinai? That's great. Jesus is New Testament and God's Son, and they have all these ideas. But if you have the second person of Godhead, if you have the Word, from John 1, the Word is giving words. Which is also very interesting because when you look at the actual Hebrew, the idea of 10 commands, a better translation of that is 10 words. The words given at Sinai. And so the words that were given by the Word. The Word was with God, the Word was God. The Logos is at Sinai giving those commands, giving those words, which then gives direction. So Jesus being an angel, a messenger in the Old Testament process. So again, what I find so interesting here about Genesis 22 is God doesn't send a person in flesh, but rather from heaven this angel tells Abraham to stop. And if it is this being the Word, Abraham and Isaac aren't going to be the sacrifice. The Word is going to be the sacrifice ultimately. And so God's purpose here was to prove Abraham, are you going to stick with me? Are you going to continue to go on this path? And when he does this, Abraham was shown to honor above all, to revere, to walk with God in whatever it is that God calls him to do. All right, and then Genesis 28:10. And for those of you that were here 2 weeks ago, we're going to get to the same place again, but we'll continue on next week. Does it ever just crack you up, the things that crack you up? And you're like, I don't even know why I think that's funny. Have you ever done that before?
It's too bad.
Does anybody else do that? I'm wondering if anybody's even listening. So I kind of went off on a tangent there. So Genesis 28:10, and we'll close with this one. This dream that.
Andy,
Yeah.
that happens, just say you guys just aren't at my level.
Yeah, that wouldn't be arrogant at all, would it?
Say ignorant?
Sorry, what? Do you have a comment? I didn't hear that. It would be cool, Ty, just for you've heard sometimes that people will do either a master's or a PhD thesis, and they will do something like really, really out there and nobody knows it's happening just to get the feedback. But then they end up looking either weird or like a jerk or whatever. And they're like, yeah, I may look like a jerk, but man, I got some really cool data out of that. That was awesome. So in Genesis 28:10, Jacob here has this dream, and he's dreaming of angels ascending and descending in terms of God's promise of what will happen in the future. So angels are a part of this dream that he has. And again, we don't know what they look like. We're not necessarily told what they look like. And some of the things that I've listened to, angels have wings.
Well, sometimes they look like people.
Sometimes they look like people. Where do they have wings? Where have we seen that? Where have you read that? And when I say, I'm going to say, give me, book, chapter, verse kind of thing, and I don't mean that in a traditional sense. We don't know. That's what we've seen them pictured as with wings. We don't find that unless it's cherubim and seraphim. But yeah, many times they're as humans. So as we go through these things, and if you do have the curiosity, find some tools, look up the word, look at the context, see what's happening there, and there's always sometimes no way of knowing. Yeah. Say that again.
How about in Revelation where you have several sets of angels that are recorded, one covering their feet, one covering their eyes?
Yes. And that's
Is that something?
yes, and we're definitely going to look at that one because that one's really cool. Because we find a lot of connection. You can connect the dots between that and some stuff. I think it's in Isaiah, and how that word in the Greek is translated to. I think it's actually either fiery ones or fiery serpents. And so there's a lot of really cool stuff in Revelation that's happening in that place. So we will definitely look at that when we get there.
Astonished or shocked at what they're seeing. Maybe that is them in human form.
Yeah.
Maybe they can
Yeah.
be whatever
Yeah.
they need to be seen as
Yeah.
to be the best communicator.
Yeah. Well, and that's a lot of why I want to go through this is, when you look at Hebrews, that you could be ministering to angels unaware. What's happening there? What's going on? And is it possible that, how many times have you had something happen in your life where something takes place and you just can't explain it? That person shouldn't be there, shouldn't happen. I know everybody's got one of these stories, but I'm going to share mine because I am. What's that? Because I'm the teacher, yeah. So whenever I had my motorcycle accident back in college, it was outside of town in Searcy, and it was in a remote area. It was on a Sunday night. Nobody should have been there. It was like in an industrial area. So it's not where anybody went and took a walk. It wasn't a nice area. It was like at, 10:30 at night. Now, for all those moms out there, what were we doing that late at night on a motorcycle in a remote area? Yes, it was dumb, but it was also 18 and not everything had formed yet. So anyway, had the motorcycle accident, and this was 1987. So I still wonder today, however long this is later, there were... Thank you. The question that popped up in my mind is, how in the world did that ambulance get there? Well, somebody called. Okay, 1987. No cell phones. Two people happened to be walking down this road where it's an industrial area. Nobody walks down there. How did they make the phone call? How did any of that happen? And I've been very refusing, not necessarily stubbornness, to think that. You have angels unaware. You have God taking care of those kind of situations. I guess God could have let me die. That's possible. But these two people walking down, and you get the hospital called. You get an ambulance there, and I get taken and fixed up, and I'm still here. So who knows how many of those kind of situations happen where we attribute it to people, and yet it's angels in human form, you know. And the times we do that for people, that you're entertaining God's messenger unaware by taking care of people. So yes, very much so, Hannah. And we'll look into those things, and really, really cool stuff. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Side too, I mean,
Yeah.
with that, I mean, yes, it's clear angels have appeared in human form.
Right.
People didn't know the difference. There are also times they appeared when they were terrifying, and people fall to the ground.
Yes.
Fear.
Yes.
So they
Yes.
appear in both forms.
Yes.
Over and over again, their first words are "fear not."
Fear not.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and as we get into Joshua chapter 4, whenever the commander of the army and Joshua falls down, and who are you with? You remember the answer? I'm not with either one of you. I'm with God. I'm his commander, his angel, et cetera, et cetera. All right, well, let's close with a prayer, and we'll continue this next Sunday. Loving God, we thank you. We praise you. Father, just help us to continue to be like Jesus and to be your messengers in this world for your light, for your glory, for your love. Father, help us to do that as we live each day. We pray this in the great name of Jesus. Amen.